Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. Nexus Letter, Nexus, two separate things. When do you need a Nexus Letter, and how do you go about getting one? I'm going to share with you just some insights, some of the thoughts that I have around this subject, and hopefully dispel some of maybe the myths that might be out there, and to just give a little clarity, hopefully. So with that, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. Now, there's 4 real components to the Nexus Letter, and they shouldn't be, I guess you shouldn't cut corners, right? When you're trying to get a good Nexus Letter. What does it mean when you need to get a Nexus Letter? Well, let's back up a little bit and understand the value and the need with regard to Nexus Letters. So, for everything with VA claims for compensation, barring presumptives, all your regular claims, it really boils down to 3 things. You need to prove to the VA your time in service. That gives you that window of opportunity, right? Then secondly, you need to have a diagnosed condition. The VA is typically not going to rate you for something you're not diagnosed for, right? Now, 99.9% of the time, you need to be the one to provide that diagnosis. The VA is not going to do that for you unless they're the ones who are providing the medical care, blah, 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 blah. So, the second piece you need is that diagnosis. Your condition must be chronic in nature or have some sort of residual effects. It has to be ongoing. The third thing is the nexus, okay? The nexus, what the VA is looking for is not so much show me that the military caused this. They're looking for more, show me that this condition that you're diagnosed for, that has chronic kind of ongoing residual effects, show me that that condition manifested during your time in service, your window of opportunity. Okay, so that's the nexus. It's tying it together, linking the condition to your window of opportunity, your time in the military. So now you know what nexus is. When do you need a Nexus Letter? Well, if you can prove your nexus with documentation, like medical documentation, then you don't need a Nexus Letter. Okay, so because you've already established a nexus, and the example of that would be you hurt yourself while you were in the military, or you developed migraines, we'll say, while you were in, and you actually had that documented during your time in service, your window of opportunity. So let's say that you were in for 6 years, right? So you're in for 6 years, and in year 3, you got seen for migraines, and you got diagnosed for migraines, and you were even given a prescription for migraines. Well, that evidence alone proves your nexus because your condition manifested during your time in service, and you have it all documented during your time in service. You've provided the nexus simply by providing them the dates that all fall within the time frame that you served. Now, when do you need a Nexus Letter? When you don't get diagnosed and have all your stuff lined up and documented during your time in service. When you wait until you get out, and now it's been 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, and finally you decide to go get diagnosed for condition X. Well, if you did not mention it during your time in the military at all, it's a little bit of a steeper hill to climb. I'm not going to lie. You got to do a little more work. Now, you may have mentioned it maybe on out processing paperwork, maybe an annual physical health assessment. Maybe you checked a box that said, in this case, migraines. So we'll say that you did mention it, but you didn't get diagnosed, right? So there's different levels of I guess, difficulty, right? If you mentioned it, you checked a box that said, we'll use migraines. I have experienced migraines. If you checked that while you were in the military in an annual physical health assessment or something like that, well, at least you now have a leg to stand on and point back to, look, I complained about that while I was in. So that's going to be an easier hill to climb. Now, if you didn't mention it anywhere, and we'll just stick on the migraines as the example, now it's really, really important that your Nexus Letter is super strong. And again, there's 4 components, and I'll go over those in a minute. So you will need to work with your doctor, okay? And I'm a fan of this, by the way. It's kind of 2 birds, 1 stone. Make sure, and this goes for any condition, that you're trying to get your Nexus letter for. And remember that the Nexus letter is just a letter from a doctor that's helping you to prove your Nexus. And remember that the VA process, the adjudication process, hinges on, I guess, the fact that if your evidence is in equipoise, meaning that it's equal on both sides, right, for and against you, the VA is supposed to rule in your favor. So sometimes they get that wrong, of course, and you'll have to take it to, either as a higher level review, or you might even push it to the Board of Veterans Appeals. So back to the Nexus piece. So the Nexus letter helps you to establish the nexus, the link between that condition and your time in service. So you need to, in my opinion, this is just me, it's nice to be able to incorporate a little extra into that. The Nexus letter itself, helping you to establish the nexus, does one thing for sure, and this is the primary purpose, which is to help you establish your service connection for that condition with the VA. In other words, get awarded for that condition. However, when you are having your doctor write your Nexus letter, you could, just saying, write a letter yourself to give them an idea of what type of, I guess, flow that you're looking for. Something that they could use as a guide to help them in writing their Nexus letter. Now, obviously, a doctor is going to change whatever they think they need to change or add whatever they think they need to add. But giving them some sort of a template to work with could be beneficial. So with that, your Nexus letter, which is going to help you to establish your service connection, could also include some language in there that could help you get the appropriate rating. So if you've watched me for a while, you know that I always talk about there's 2 things that you're trying to accomplish when you file your claim. Yes, service connection. And that's what everybody talks about, right? Get you service connected for that. Well, let's not just get you service connected, but let's get you the appropriate rating. If you should be a 50% rating for migraines and you get a 10, did you really win? No, you didn't. So let's front load information that the VA needs into different documents and different pieces of evidence that we supply that will help them make the appropriate decision. So how do you do that? Circle back into your schedule of ratings, pull up your migraines, find your migraines in the schedule of ratings, and read each line. For a 50% rating, you must exhibit this. For a 30%, you must exhibit that. For a 10%, you must exhibit this. Whichever one relates to you, right? You are the patient. You know you better than anybody. You know you better than the doctor. So you need to make sure that you are clear with the doctor and that you let them know that you exhibit all of these things. And that, oh, by the way, you would like it if they included that verbiage in the Nexus letter for you. Now, some people get a little bit worried about, hey, is my doctor, they're doing all this extra work for me. You could offer to pay, right? There's also places that'll write Nexus letters for you, reviewing your medical records, having a conversation with you, and then write you a Nexus letter for a fee. You could offer to pay your doctor a little bit extra for the time and energy that it takes. And also, I'm a fan of looking at it a little bit from a business lens for the doctor, especially if it's a smaller practice and where they're really relying on you as a patient, is to have that conversation of, hey, look, I'm filing a claim with the VA so that the VA can reimburse me for these medical expenses by way of a higher compensation pay, right? You don't need to say that part. I'm telling you that part. So look, I'm filing a claim with the VA for this condition, so that way they can reimburse me for my medical expenses here. Would you mind writing a Nexus letter for me? I'll give you some sort of a template that kind of outlines what I'm looking for, so that way we can provide the VA with the appropriate information. Yeah, sure, I'll do that for you. Great, I'll drop off that letter for you at the front desk, and then, you could take a couple weeks, it's fine, So having that type of a conversation with your doctor could be helpful. It's better than saying, hey, I just need you to do this, period. Or I need you to do this so I can go to the VA and stop seeing you as a doctor, and I'll just go to the VA and get my care there. So the 4 things here are, you have to have a credentialed doctor. Now, if you have a very specific thing, seeing a specialist in that realm, right? If it's orthopedics, it's orthopedics, right? If it's mental health, then it's mental health, right? Whatever it is that you have, if you have just a general practitioner that sees you for it, then that's what you have. But if you're seeing a specialist for it and your general practitioner, kind of back and forth, try to get it from the next level up. That specialist, and this is the reason why, either one could write the Nexus letter, but the higher credentialed you go, gives more weight to your side of the argument, right? So remember how we talked about if things are in equipoise, equal on both sides? Well, let's say they're off a little bit. You're down here and the VA is over here with their C&P exams and so forth. Well, if you supplied a Nexus letter from a specialist, all of a sudden you're up here. So it'll be easier for the VA to rule in your favor. And again, remember that you're working on something where you're trying to build the bridge back to your time in service and prove to the VA that your condition manifested during your time in service. So it's a lot of, I never documented it when I was in, and this is why. And now I never got diagnosed for it until 20 years after service, 30 years after service, and this is why, right? You would want to basically tell your story on the delay, right? Migraines would be an easy one, right? I never documented when I was in because my medic or my corpsman gave me hands full of Motrin, and they never wrote anything down. So I was taking Motrin. Then I would just go to the grocery store, and I'd buy Motrin, or I'd go to the gas station, and I'd buy Advil or whatever. And I would just take that. And that's how I survived. And then I got out, and I just continued to do that. And then it wasn't until I talked to a friend of mine or I saw a commercial on TV that talked about migraine headaches and some sort of medication. And I thought, you know what, I might as well go down. I didn't go down to get diagnosed. I already knew I had migraines. I went down so I could get a prescription and see if that worked better than my handsfuls of Motrin, destroying my body internally, right? So writing those types of letters, explaining the delays and all of this stuff helps, because you really need to think about what if the VA denies me and I need to push it all the way through to the Board of Veterans Appeals and have a judge look at it. The judge is going to look at all the evidence supplied. So you need to be able to tell your story. Now, number 2, so the credentialed doctor, very important, right? And the higher the credentials, the better. The review of medical records related to the claim. This section is typically the bulk of the Nexus letter. So the doctor will be talking about any sort of issues with regard to, or any of your issues with regard to your medical claims specific to what you're filing for, right? So they will stay specific to your condition. Now, if there's secondaries involved, you can bring those up as well. Okay, so this is focused on your condition and the review of your medical records, and they're going to talk about, all of that. Then they're going to have to state the number 3 is the probability of the service connection, right? So the probability, again, if it's equal, it's at least likely as not to have occurred, manifested, resulted from, whatever the right verbiage is, right, for that specific condition. So in this case, migraines 3 years in of a 6-year enlistment, we'll say, well, then it is at least likely as not that the veterans' migraines manifested during their time in service, right? And then, so that's the probability. Now, you can ask for them to say more than likely, right? Now, and if they do, that's great. If they're hesitant on the more than likely, then say, hey, look, then that's fine. Can you just do at least likely is not a coin flip? I mean, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that anybody could do that. So now this part's a little bit important. It's important. The rationale of the medical opinion. So you want them to explain why they feel as though that's the case. Now, here's an important piece. If you thumbed through your files If you thumbed through your medical files and you saw one little tiny mention of migraines somewhere, you need to bring that up to your doctor and provide that to them so they can say in their letter with regard to the review of your medical records related to the claim and the rationale, that information could be used for both of those. So again, to run through it, the four things are you have to have a doctor you have to have a credentialed doctor, right, or medical professional. Ideally, it's not a physician's assistant or a nurse, right? You want to get up into the doctor and specialist roles. So they must be credentialed. Number 2 is they're going to speak to the review of the medical records related to the claim. And then 3 would be the probability of service connection. Ideally, it's more than likely that this condition has resulted from or manifested during whatever the right verbiage is. However, you can reduce that down to at least likely as not to have manifested or whatever. And then the 4th thing is they need to provide the rationale for their medical opinion. And again, I'm a fan of give them a decent snapshot of what they could be looking for as far as a template. With that, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.